Richard Griffin's hand hovers over the cryopod's activation panel. The stunningly beautiful alien female inside beckons him, promising answers to centuries-old questions about the vanished Milan civilization. His breath fogs the glass as he leans closer, studying her otherworldly features. The derelict ship creaks around him, a tomb of advanced technology ripe for Earth's interstellar salvage corps. He taps his comlink. Static. The ship's communication systems are jammed, leaving him isolated. Protocol dictates he report the find immediately, but curiosity burns through his veins. His fingers dance across the console, initiating the wake-up sequence. The pod hisses open. Mist spills onto the deck plates. The alien's eyes snap open, glowing with an unnatural intensity. She gasps, chest heaving, as she gulps her first breath in centuries. Richard steps back, hands raised placatingly. "Easy there," he says, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. "I'm not here to hurt you." The alien woman, Astra, he'll later learn, doesn't understand. Disorientation turns to fear, then to aggression. She lashes out with inhuman speed and strength, her fist connecting with Richard's chest. He stumbles backward, the wind knocked from his lungs. A tense standoff ensues. Richard's hand hovers near his sidearm, but he resists drawing it. Astra crouches, ready to spring, her eyes darting around the unfamiliar surroundings. The ship groans. Lights flicker ominously. A high-pitched whine fills the air as automated defense systems awaken. Energy bolts streak past them, scorching the bulkhead. "Run!" Richard shouts, grabbing Astra's arm. She hesitates for a split second before instinct takes over. They sprint down the corridor, dodging lethal energy blasts. Richard marvels at Astra's incredible agility and reflexes as she vaults over debris and slides under closing bulkheads with ease. They reach the hangar bay, chest heaving. Richard's shuttle sits where he left it, but a smoking hole in its hull dashes his hopes of an easy escape. His eyes lock onto a sleek Malon vessel nearby. "Looks like we're upgrading our ride," he mutters, leading Astra toward the alien craft. As they approach, the hangar bay doors rumble. A fleet of Earth military ships looms outside, no doubt drawn by the energy surge from the awakening cryopod. Richard freezes, torn between duty and the potential secrets Astra represents. In that moment, he makes his choice. He pulls Astra into the Milan ship, fingers flying over unfamiliar controls. The engines roar to life as Earth forces demand his surrender. Richard grins, adrenaline singing in his veins. "Sorry, boys," he says to himself. "This is one salvage op that's going off book." The Malon ship blasts out of the hangar, weaving between energy beams from both the derelict vessel and the Earth fleet. As they streak into open space, Richard glances at his alien passenger. Astra stares back, a mix of fear and wonder in her eyes. An adventure awaits, filled with danger, discovery, and the spark of an impossible connection between a human soldier and an alien, sleeping beauty. The secrets of the Malon civilization beckon, along with the promise of excitement Richard never imagined when he first boarded that abandoned ship. He sets a course for the unknown, leaving Earth and protocol far behind. The Malon ship's engines thrummed with power as Richard guided it through the chaotic debris field. Laser fire from Earth's fleet sizzled past, missing them by mere meters. Astra clung to her seat, eyes wide with a mix of fear and exhilaration. "Hold on tight," Richard called out, his hands dancing across the unfamiliar controls. "This might get bumpy." As if in response to his touch, holographic displays flickered to life around them. Astra's eyes lit up with recognition. She reached out, her slender fingers intertwining with streams of light. The ship responded instantly, shields strengthening and weapon systems coming online. "You can read this?" Richard asked, incredulous. Astra nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "My people built this," she said haltingly, the words sounding strange on her tongue. Working in tandem, they wove through the barrage of enemy fire. Richard's piloting skills combined with Astra's innate understanding of Milan technology made them a formidable team. The ship danced and weaved, always one step ahead of their pursuers. "We need to get out of here," Richard muttered, scanning the displays for an escape route. "Any ideas?" Astra's fingers flew across the holographic interface. Suddenly, a new set of controls materialized before them. "Faster than light," she said, pointing. Richard's eyes widened. "You're kidding me. This thing has an FTL drive?" Without waiting for confirmation, he activated the system. The stars around them blurred into streaks of light as the Malan vessel leapt into faster-than-light travel, leaving the Earth fleet far behind. As the adrenaline of their escape faded, Richard and Astra found themselves in an uneasy silence. The vast emptiness of space stretched out before them, their destination unknown. Richard cleared his throat, attempting to bridge the gap between them. "So, Astra, right? That's your name?" he asked. She nodded, then hesitated before speaking. "You... Richard?" He smiled, surprised by how quickly she was picking up his language. "That's right, Richard Griffin, at your service." Over the next few hours, their communication improved rapidly. Astra interfaced with the ship's translation matrix, her species' advanced cognitive abilities, allowing her to absorb English at an astonishing rate. As they talked, Richard learned the truth about his mysterious passenger. "I am a scientist," Astra explained, her speech becoming more fluid. "My people faced extinction. I was put to sleep. To survive." Richard's mind reeled at the implications. "The Malan civilization? You're one of the last?" Astra's eyes clouded with sorrow. "Perhaps. I do not know how many survived." Their conversation was cut short by a series of alarms blaring throughout the ship. Red warning lights bathed the cockpit in an eerie glow. Richard frantically scanned the displays, trying to decipher the Malan text. "What's happening?" he asked, fighting to keep the panic from his voice. Astra's fingers danced across the interface, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Life support failing," she announced, her voice tight with worry. For the next several hours, Richard and Astra worked side by side, racing against time to repair the malfunctioning systems. The close quarters and shared danger forged a bond between them, transcending the vast differences in their origins. Richard found himself mesmerized by Astra's grace and intelligence, while she marveled at his resourcefulness and courage. As they reconnected the final components, their hands brushed together. A spark of electricity seemed to pass between them, and for a moment they stood frozen, lost in each other's eyes. The spell was broken by a gentle chime from the ship's console, signaling the successful repair. Richard cleared his throat, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. We should check our heading," he said, moving towards the navigation controls. Before he could reach them, a new alert caught their attention. A distress signal, pulsing steadily on the long-range scanners. Richard hesitated, torn between self-preservation and his ingrained sense of duty. Astra studied his face, reading the conflict in his expression. "Your people?" she asked softly. Richard nodded. "Could be. It's risky, but..." He trailed off, already knowing what he had to do. With a shared look of drive, they altered course towards the signal's origin. The Malan ship dropped out of FTL, revealing a harsh desert world below them. As they entered the atmosphere, the sensors pinpointed the crash site of an Earth exploration vessel. Landing near the wreckage, Richard and Astra donned environmental suits to protect against the planet's unforgiving climate. They approached the crashed ship cautiously, Richard's hand hovering near his weapon. A figure emerged from the twisted metal, aiming a rifle at them. "Hold it right there," a gruff voice commanded. Richard raised his hand slowly. "Easy, soldier. We're here to help." The man lowered his weapon slightly, revealing the insignia of an Earth captain. "Identify yourself," he demanded. "Richard Griffin, Interstellar Salvage Corps," Richard replied. "And this is Astra. We picked up your distress signal." The captain's eyes narrowed as he took in Astra's alien features. "Captain Marcus Steele," he introduced himself warily. "And I've got a lot of questions about your companion there." Before Richard could respond, a bone-chilling roar echoed across the desert landscape. All three turned to see a massive reptilian creature cresting a nearby dune, its eyes fixed hungrily upon them. "Inside now!" Richard shouted, drawing his weapon as the beast charged towards them. They retreated into the relative safety of the crashed ship, the sound of claws scraping against metal filling the air. As they barricaded the entrance, Richard knew their problems were just the beginning. Trapped on a hostile world with dwindling supplies, an injured Earth captain, and a pursuing fleet, their adventure was only beginning. The roar of the beast outside the crashed ship faded as Richard, Astra, and Captain Steele huddled inside, catching their breath. They knew they couldn't stay there forever, with limited supplies and the constant threat of the hostile creature returning. "We need to get off this rock," Richard said, his eyes darting between Astra and the Earth captain. "Our ship is still intact. If we can make it back, we might have a chance." Captain Steele nodded grimly. "Agreed, but we'll need a distraction to get past that thing out there." Working together, they devised a plan. Using the crashed ship's remaining power, they rigged a series of explosives to create a diversion. When the moment came, they sprinted across the harsh desert landscape, the alien beast momentarily confused by the sudden commotion. Safely aboard the Malon vessel, Richard wasted no time plotting a course away from the hostile planet. As the ship broke atmosphere, he let out a sigh of relief. "That was too close," he muttered. But their moment of respite was short-lived. As Richard set course for the rumored Malon outpost, alarms suddenly blared throughout the cockpit. The ship shuddered violently, dropping out of faster-than-light travel with a sickening lurch. "What's happening?" Captain Steele demanded, gripping the back of Richard's chair. Astra's fingers flew across the holographic displays, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Propulsion system. Critical malfunction," she reported, her voice tight with worry. Richard's stomach dropped as he realized the gravity of their situation. They were stranded in an uncharted region of space, with limited resources and the ever-present threat of the pursuing Earth fleet, not to mention whatever other dangers might lurk in this unknown sector. "Can we fix it?" he asked, turning to Astra. She bit her lip, studying the readouts. "Possible, but complex. Will take time." "Time we may not have," Captain Steele interjected, his eyes scanning the starfield visible through the view screen. "We're sitting ducks out here." Richard nodded grimly. "Then we better get to work." Over the next several hours, Richard and Astra worked side by side in the ship's engine room, attempting to repair the damaged propulsion system. The close quarters and shared urgency of their task brought them into frequent physical contact, each brush of skin against skin sending a jolt of awareness through them both. As Richard reached past Astra to adjust a power coupling, his arm grazed her side. He froze, suddenly hyper-aware of her proximity, the faint scent of her alien skin. Their eyes met, and for a moment the universe seemed to shrink down to just the two of them. Astra broke the spell, clearing her throat softly. "This part, here," she said, pointing to a pulsing component in the holographic schematic floating before them. "Needs replacing." Richard nodded, forcing himself to focus on the task at hand. "Right. I'll see if I can fabricate a replacement using the ship's matter synthesizer." As they continued to work, the tension between them grew, a palpable energy that neither could fully ignore. Yet they pushed on, acutely aware of the stakes riding on their success. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Captain Steele grew restless. His military training made him uneasy with inaction, and his suspicions about Astra had never fully abated. With Richard and the alien woman occupied in the engine room, he saw an opportunity to seek answers. Steele approached the main computer console, his fingers hovering over the interface. He hesitated for a moment, knowing he was about to violate the trust Richard had placed in him. But his need to understand their situation, to protect Earth from potential threats, overrode his misgivings. He began to search the ship's database, looking for information about the Malon-Zentari conflict. As he delved deeper into the files, his eyes widened at the fragments of information he uncovered. Images of devastated worlds, records of unimaginable casualties. It was worse than he had feared. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. Steele cursed, realizing he had triggered some kind of security protocol. Within moments, Richard and Astra burst into the cockpit, their faces a mix of confusion and suspicion. "What did you do?" Richard demanded, his voice hard. Steele straightened, meeting their gaze evenly. "I needed answers about the Zentari, about why we're really out here. And I found them." He gestured to the displays, still showing glimpses of the horrors he had uncovered. Astra's face fell as she saw the images, a deep sadness entering her eyes. She looked at Richard, then back to Steele, seeming to come to a decision. "You are right," she said softly. "You deserve to know." She stepped forward, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "I will show you." The cockpit darkened as a new holographic display sprang to life around them. Richard and Steele found themselves surrounded by images of worlds they had never seen. Malon worlds, teeming with life and advanced technology. But as they watched, these idyllic scenes gave way to chaos and destruction. Massive Zentari warships filled the skies, raining death upon the Malon cities below. Entire continents were scorched, oceans boiled away as the relentless assault continued. Richard felt his heart clench as he witnessed the systematic annihilation of Astra's people. This is genocide," Steele whispered, his earlier suspicions forgotten in the face of such overwhelming horror. Astra nodded, her voice heavy with sorrow. "My people, we were nearly wiped out. Those of us who survived, like me, were placed in stasis, hoping that one day we might rebuild." As the holographic display faded, Richard turned to Astra, his mind blown from what he had seen. "But why? Why did the Zentari do this?" Astra shook her head. "We do not know. Much was lost in our fall, but now, after centuries of silence, they return. And your world, Earth, may be their next target." The gravity of their situation settled over the trio like a heavy cloak. The fate of Earth, perhaps of the entire galaxy, rested on their shoulders. As they stood there, processing the weight of this revelation, a new alert chimed from the ship's console. Richard moved to investigate, his eyes widening as he took in the readings. "There's something out there," he said, his voice filled with a mix of awe and apprehension. "Some kind of massive structure." As they peered out into the void of space, a colossal shape began to take form against the backdrop of stars. An ancient alien space station of unfathomable size and complexity. Astra leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with a mix of curiosity and hope. "Perhaps answers," she breathed. Richard nodded, setting a course for the mysterious station. As they approached, he couldn't shake the feeling that they stood on the precipice of something monumental, a discovery that could change the course of the war against the Zentari and the fate of all their people's destinies. As they approached the massive structure, the ship's sensors suddenly blared to life, detecting multiple incoming vessels. "Zentari scout ships," Astra announced, her voice tense as she studied the readouts. "They must have tracked us here." Richard's mind focused as he assessed their options. "We can't outrun them in our current condition. That station might be our only chance." Captain Steele nodded grimly. "Agreed, but we'll need to defend it once we're inside." As they maneuvered towards the ancient space station, Richard and Steele hurried to prepare their defenses. Astra remained at the controls, her fingers flying across the holographic interface as she attempted to interface with the station's systems. The Zentari ships closed in rapidly, their energy weapons flaring to life. The first volley struck the station's shields, causing the entire structure to shudder. "Shields holding," Astra reported, "but I don't know how long they'll last against sustained fire." Richard took control of the station's automated turrets, his military training kicking in as he coordinated their defense. Steele manned the ship's weapons, providing additional covering fire as wave after wave of Zentari fighters swarmed around them. As the battle raged, Astra worked frantically to decode the station's weapon systems. Her eyes widened as she made a breakthrough. "I've found it! The station has a powerful weapon, but—" She hesitated, her expression torn. "But what?" Richard called out, not taking his eyes off the targeting display. "It requires a direct neural interface with a biological entity to function," Astra explained. I must do it. My Malon physiology is more compatible with the technology than human biology." Richard's head snapped around, concern etched on his face. "Astra, no, it's too dangerous. We don't know what it could do to you." She met his gaze, her tenacity unwavering. "We have no choice. It's our only chance." Before Richard could protest further, Astra connected herself to the weapon system. Her body went rigid, eyes rolling back as her consciousness merged with the station's AI. Richard rushed to her side, holding her steady as she convulsed. The moment he touched her, an unexpected feedback loop formed. Through their physical contact, Richard found himself partially experiencing Astra's mental journey. He gasped as fragments of alien code and incomprehensible data flooded his senses. Meanwhile, Captain Steele pushed his piloting skills to the limit, weaving through the ongoing assault. A massive Zentari battlecruiser appeared, its main cannon charging ominously. Just as all seemed lost, Astra's eyes snapped open, glowing with an otherworldly light. "Now!" she screamed. A pulse of energy erupted from the station, engulfing the Zentari fleet. Ship after ship went dark, their systems disrupted and rendered powerless. For a moment, victory seemed certain. Then alarms blared throughout the station. The weapon's enormous energy drain had caused critical systems to fail, including life support. Oxygen levels began to plummet. Richard made the difficult decision in an instant. "We have to go, now!" He disconnected Astra from the neural interface, her body limp and barely conscious. As Steele prepared their ship for departure, a new problem arose. The docking clamps refused to disengage. With no other option, they raced for the external airlock, Richard carrying Astra's semi-conscious form. They found only 2 functional emergency spacesuits. Without hesitation, Richard sealed Astra into one, connecting his own oxygen supply to hers through a tube. The trio began their perilous spacewalk across the station's exterior. Richard's vision blurred as his oxygen depleted, each step becoming a monumental effort. They reached their ship just as his legs began to give out. Captain Steele worked furiously to override the docking clamps manually. As the ship broke free, they tumbled inside. The airlock sealed and atmosphere flooded the chamber. Richard collapsed to the floor, lungs burning as he gasped for air. Astra, now recovered, knelt beside him. Her hands moved with practiced precision as she applied Malon medical techniques to stabilize his condition. As Richard's eyes fluttered open, their gazes locked. In that moment, the shared ordeal forged a profound connection between them. Captain Steele watched the exchange, his earlier suspicions giving way to a reluctant acceptance of the bond forming between the human soldier and the alien scientist. As they fled the disintegrating station, long-range scans revealed a massive Zentari fleet regrouping at the system's edge. The brief elation of their victory evaporated, replaced by the sobering reality of the challenges that lay ahead. "We need to warn Earth," Steele said, his voice grim, "and find a way to replicate that weapon's technology." Richard nodded, still catching his breath. "The Malon outpost. It's our best shot." With their faster-than-light drive damaged in the escape, they set course for the rumored hidden Malon facility. The journey would be slow, but it would give them time to study the data from the ancient station, and for Richard and Astra to explore their deepening connection. As the stars streaked by outside the viewports, Astra began to share her knowledge of Malon technology and history with Richard and Steele. The fate of 2 civilizations now rested in their hands, a weight they all felt keenly as they looked out into the vast, star-filled expanse before them. The weight of their mission pressed heavily upon their shoulders as they journeyed towards the hidden Malon outpost, their damaged ship limping through the vastness of space. Days stretched into weeks as they traveled at sublight speeds, the faster-than-light drive still inoperable. Richard and Astra spent countless hours poring over the data from the ancient station, searching for any advantage against the Zentari threat. Captain Steele maintained a vigilant watch, always wary of potential pursuit. As they neared the coordinates of the rumored Malon facility, their sensors detected an anomaly ahead. Richard leaned forward in his seat, studying the readout with furrowed brows. "What is it?" Astra asked, moving to stand beside him. "Some kind of debris field," Richard replied, his voice tight with concern. "It's massive, stretching for thousands of kilometers." Captain Steele joined them at the console, his expression grim. "The remnants of an old battleground, perhaps?" Astra's eyes widened as she took in the sensor data. Yes, I believe so. This must be the site of one of the great battles between the Malon and the Zentari." As they drew closer, the true scale of the devastation became apparent. The view screen filled with a vast sea of twisted metal and shattered hulls. Fragments of once mighty warships drifted silently through the void, a graveyard of long-forgotten conflicts. "We'll have to navigate through it," Richard said, his hands already moving across the ship's controls. "Our current trajectory takes us right into the heart of the field." Steele nodded, his military training kicking in. "Agreed. We can't risk a detour with our damaged drive. The Centauri could catch up to us at any moment." The next hours were tense as they carefully maneuvered through the treacherous debris. Richard and Astra worked in tandem at the ship's controls, their bodies often pressed close in the confined space of the cockpit. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension, their growing attraction amplified by the high-stakes situation. Captain Steele, noticing their closeness, discreetly excused himself. "I'll check on the engine status," he muttered, leaving Richard and Astra alone. As they navigated the field, their ship shuddered and groaned. Small impacts from debris fragments rocked the vessel, each collision a potential disaster. Richard's hands flew across the controls, making minute adjustments to their course. Suddenly, a larger piece of wreckage loomed before them. Richard tried to evade, but their damaged maneuvering thrusters failed to respond quickly enough. The impact rocked the ship violently, throwing Astra against Richard. Alarms blared throughout the vessel as Steele's voice crackled over the intercom. "We've got a hull breach in Section 3. Rapid depressurization." Richard and Astra sprang into action, racing towards the damaged section. They arrived to find emergency bulkheads already sealing off the affected area. Working together, they quickly donned pressure suits and entered the airlock. Inside the breached compartment, they could see the stars through a jagged tear in the hull. Richard grabbed a nearby repair kit while Astra used her knowledge of Malone technology to interface with the ship's systems, rerouting power to strengthen the remaining structural integrity fields. They moved with practiced efficiency, sealing the breach with a specialized compound. As the last of the sealant was applied, the ship gave another violent lurch. Richard stumbled, nearly losing his footing in the zero-gravity environment. Astra reached out, steadying him. Their eyes met through their helmet visors, faces only inches apart. The adrenaline of the moment, combined with weeks of building tension, finally overcame them. In perfect synchronization, they reached for each other's helmet releases. As the pressurized compartment refilled with atmosphere, their lips met in a passionate kiss. The intensity of their shared experiences, the constant danger, and their growing feelings for one another, poured into that single moment of connection. The ship jolted again, more violently this time, breaking them apart. Captain Steele's voice came over the intercom once more, urgent and strained. "We've got a problem. We're caught in some kind of energy field from one of the derelict ships. I can't break us free." Richard and Astra rushed back to the cockpit, their moment of intimacy pushed aside by the pressing reality of their situation. As they entered, they saw the massive hulk of an ancient Malon warship through the view screen, its skeletal remains entangling their smaller vessel. Astra's eyes widened as she took in the readings. "Impossible. Some of its systems are still active after all this time." Richard turned to her, a spark of hope in his eyes. "Could we use any of it? To repair our ship, maybe even improve it?" She nodded slowly, her mind already racing with possibilities. Yes, I believe we could. But it would be dangerous. We'd have to board the derelict." Captain Steele, who had been silently assessing the situation, spoke up. "It's a risk we'll have to take. We're sitting ducks out here otherwise." As they prepared for the Perilous salvage mission, Richard caught Astra's eye. An unspoken understanding passed between them. They would address their growing feelings later. For now, survival took precedence. Donning their spacesuits once more, the trio prepared to embark into the unknown depths of the ancient Malon warship. As the airlock cycled open, revealing the twisted corridors of the derelict vessel, they steeled themselves for the challenges ahead. Little did they know that their mission would test not only their skills and courage, but also the newfound bond between them. Richard, Astra, and Captain Steele emerged from the ancient Malon warship, their salvage mission complete. As they maneuvered their battered vessel away from the debris field, a sense of anticipation filled the air. They were nearing the coordinates of the hidden Malon outpost, their last hope for turning the tide against the Centauri threat. As they approached their destination, the ship's sensors began to pick up unusual readings. Richard leaned forward, studying the display intently. "There's something odd about that planetoid ahead," he said, gesturing to a small celestial body on the display. Astra moved closer, her eyes widening as she recognized the energy signature. "It's a cloaking field," she exclaimed. "Advanced Malin technology. The outpost must be there." With practiced precision, Astra interfaced with the ship's systems, transmitting a complex series of codes. The space before them shimmered, and suddenly a sprawling underground complex materialized beneath the planetoid's surface. "Incredible," Captain Steele breathed, guiding their vessel towards a concealed hangar. As they touched down, the trio exchanged glances, each acutely aware of the weight of the moment. They donned their protective gear and cautiously made their way into the outpost. The moment they crossed the threshold, a piercing alarm sounded. Holographic projections of Malan sentries materialized around them, weapons at the ready. "Intruders detected," a disembodied voice boomed. "Identify yourselves or face immediate termination." Astra stepped forward, her voice clear and authoritative. "I am Astra, Chief Xenobiologist of the Malan Science Council. Authorization code Zeta 97 Epsilon." For a tense moment, silence reigned. Then the holograms lowered their weapons. "Identity confirmed. Welcome, Astra of the Science Council. Access granted." As they ventured deeper into the facility, they were struck by the eerie stillness. Pristine laboratories and workshops lined the corridors, filled with prototype weapons and technology beyond even Astra's understanding. "Where is everyone?" Richard asked, his enhanced senses on high alert. Astra shook her head, moving towards a central computer terminal. Her fingers flew across the alien interface, and suddenly the room was filled with holographic displays. "They're here," she said softly, pointing to a schematic of a massive chamber deep within the complex, in cryosleep, waiting for the right moment to rebuild. Captain Steele's expression hardened. "Well, that moment is now. We need to wake them up." They made their way to the cryosleep chamber, a vast cavern filled with hundreds of pods. Astra began the revival process, her hands trembling slightly as she worked. One by one, the pods hissed open. Disoriented Malan scientists and soldiers emerged, blinking in the artificial light. Among them, a tall, imposing figure strode forward, immediately taking charge. "I am Commander Zalen," he announced, his gaze sweeping over the humans and settling on Astra. "Explain your presence here and why you consort with these aliens." Richard tensed, sensing the hostility in Zalen's tone. He stepped forward, meeting the commander's gaze. "We're here because Earth faces the same threat that forced you into hiding. The Zentari are back, and they're coming for us all." Murmurs rippled through the gathered Malon. Zalen's eyes narrowed. "And why should we believe you? How do we know this isn't some human trick to steal our technology?" Richard's mind raced, knowing he needed to act quickly to prevent the situation from escalating. Without hesitation, he turned to Astra. "The neural interface weapon system. I'll do it." Astra's eyes widened in alarm. "Richard, no! It's never been tested on a human. The risk is too great." But Richard stood firm. "It's our only chance to prove ourselves, to show we're willing to put everything on the line to fight alongside you." Commander Zalen watched this exchange with interest. "Very well, human. If you survive the interface, perhaps we can discuss an alliance." The next hours were a blur of pain and disorientation for Richard. As the Milan scientist connected him to the experimental system, it felt as if his very being was being torn apart and reassembled. Through it all, Astra remained by his side, her presence a lifeline in the storm of agony. Suddenly, Richard's world exploded with sensation. His body hummed with newfound energy, his reflexes sharper than ever before. But with this power came a flood of alien memories, visceral flashes of ancient battles against the Zentari. As Richard struggled to process these new abilities and experiences, alarms blared throughout the outpost. Captain Steele's voice crackled over the intercom, tight with urgency. "Zentari scout fleet detected entering the system. They must have picked up our energy signature when we reactivated the outpost." Commander Zalen barked orders, and the newly awakened Malon sprang into action. Richard pushed himself to his feet, still unsteady but determined. "I'm ready," he said, meeting Astra's concerned gaze. "Let's show them what humans and Malon can do together." As they raced to the command center, the first waves of Zentari ships appeared on the long-range scanners. Richard flexed his hands, feeling the power of the neural interface coursing through him. Beside him, Astra worked furiously at a control panel, coordinating with the Malon defense systems. The battle for the outpost, and perhaps the future of both their species, was about to begin. The Zentari scout fleet materialized on the long-range scanners, their ominous silhouettes growing larger with each passing moment. Richard's enhanced senses, still adjusting to the neural interface, picked up every minute detail on the display screens. "They're approaching fast," he said, his voice steady despite the surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins. "We need to act now." Commander Zalen nodded, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. "Activate the planetary shield. Prepare all defense systems." The outpost hummed to life as energy coursed through ancient conduits. A shimmering dome materialized around the planetoid, its iridescent surface rippling with power. Richard turned to Astra, who was already working furiously at a nearby console. "I'm taking a squad to the fighter bay. Can you coordinate with the gunners from here?" She met his gaze, her expression a mix of dedication and concern. "I've got it covered. Be careful out there." As Richard raced towards the hangar, he marveled at his newfound agility. The neural interface had heightened his reflexes to superhuman levels, allowing him to navigate the complex's winding corridors with ease. He arrived at the fighter bay to find a group of Malon pilots preparing for launch. Their eyes widened as he approached, clearly surprised by his presence. "I'll be leading this squadron," Richard announced, his voice carrying an authority he didn't entirely feel. "The interface has given me tactical insights that could give us an edge." The Malon pilots exchanged glances but didn't argue. As they climbed into their sleek alien craft, Richard felt a moment of doubt. He pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. The hangar doors slid open, revealing the star-studded expanse of space. Richard's fighter shot forward, leading the formation as they emerged from the planetoid's protective shield. The Zentari fleet loomed before them, a wall of gleaming metal and pulsing energy weapons. Richard's mind raced, processing tactical data faster than he thought possible. "Evasive maneuvers," he barked into the comm. "Pattern Sigma 3. The Malon fighters responded instantly, scattering in a complex formation that confused the Zentari targeting systems. Energy beams lanced through space, missing the agile craft by mere meters. Richard's hands flew across his control panel, coordinating with the outpost defense grid. Bursts of concentrated energy erupted from the planetoid's surface, striking the Zentari ships with pinpoint accuracy. "Direct hits on 2 enemy vessels?" Astra's voice crackled over the comm. "Their shields are weakening." As the battle raged, Captain Steele's voice cut through the chaos. "Richard, we've got a plan. We need you to lead some of their ships into the nearby asteroid field." "Understood," Richard replied, already plotting a course. "Squad, form up on me. We're going to play a little game of cat and mouse." The Malon fighters fell into formation behind him as he dove towards the dense field of tumbling rocks. Several Zentari ships broke off from the main fleet, giving chase. Richard weaved through the asteroids, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to navigate the treacherous terrain with impossible precision. Behind him, 2 Zentari vessels weren't so lucky. They collided with massive chunks of space rock, their hulls crumpling under the impact. As Richard emerged from the asteroid field, a warning klaxon blared in his cockpit. "We've got boarders!" Astra's voice was tight with tension. "A Zentari team has breached the outer defenses. They're inside the facility." Without hesitation, Richard turned his fighter back towards the outpost. "I'm on my way," he said, pushing the engines to their limit. He landed in the hangar and sprinted towards the breach site, gathering a team of Malon soldiers along the way. As they approached the infiltrated section, the sounds of energy weapons and shouted orders echoed through the corridors. Richard's mind raced, analyzing the layout and formulating a plan. "Team Alpha, flank left," he ordered. "Beta, With me. We'll draw their fire and create an opening." They engaged the Zentari boarders in a fierce firefight. Richard's enhanced speed and strength gave him an edge, allowing him to dodge enemy fire and land precise shots. But the Zentari's superior numbers began to push them back. Suddenly, the corridor was plunged into darkness. The Zentari's energy weapons flickered and died, leaving them momentarily defenseless. "Electromagnetic pulse activated," Astra's voice announced over the comm. "You have a 30-second window." Richard and his team seized the opportunity, charging forward and overwhelming the disoriented Zentari. In a flurry of hand-to-hand combat, they subdued the boarders and secured the breach. As the last Zentari fell, a searing pain lanced through Richard's skull. He stumbled, the neural interface suddenly flooding his mind with conflicting signals. "Richard?" Astra's voice seemed distant, muffled by the pain. "The interface control system is damaged. I'm coming to you." He tried to respond, but his vision blurred, the world spinning around him. Through the haze of agony, he was vaguely aware of alarms blaring and the continued sounds of battle outside the outpost. Suddenly, Astra was there, her hands moving swiftly as she worked to stabilize the interface. Richard felt her body pressed against his as she shielded him from a shower of sparks erupting from a damaged conduit. The pain receded, replaced by a wave of relief and something deeper, an intense connection to Astra that transcended the physical. Their eyes met, a wordless understanding passing between them. The moment was shattered by Commander Zalen's voice over the comm. "All personnel, brace for impact. Primary weapon firing." The outpost shuddered as a massive surge of energy built up within its core. Through the nearest viewport, Richard and Astra watched as a blinding beam of ionic energy lanced out into space, cutting through the remaining Zentari ships like a scythe through wheat. As the light faded, they saw the remnants of the Zentari fleet retreating, their numbers drastically reduced. In the aftermath of the battle, Richard and Astra stood in the outpost command center, watching as Malon's ships prepared for their next mission. The long-range sensors blinked ominously, showing a much larger Zentari force gathering in a nearby sector. "We've won the battle," Richard said softly, his hand finding Astra's. "But the war is just beginning." Astra nodded, her fingers intertwining with his. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As they looked out at the stars, the weight of their task settled upon them. The fight to save both their species and their future together was not nearly finished. Over. Richard and Astra exchanged a determined glance, knowing that their next steps would be crucial in the fight against the Zentari threat. Captain Steele approached them, his face etched with a mixture of exhaustion and drive. "We need to move quickly," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Commander Zalen has provided us with a newly retrofitted scout ship. It's our best chance at uniting the scattered Malon survivors and warning Earth." Richard nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "What about the neural interface? I can feel it changing me." Astra's brow furrowed with concern. "We'll need to stabilize it before we leave. I've been working on something that might help." As they made their way to the medical bay, Richard's mind raced with fragments of alien memories, flashes of ancient battles and long-forgotten strategies. The neural interface was integrating more deeply with his consciousness, providing valuable insights but threatening to overwhelm his sense of self. Astra worked swiftly, attaching a small device to the base of Richard's skull. "This neural stabilizer should help manage the flood of memories," she explained, her fingers brushing against his skin. "But it requires constant physical contact to function properly. I'll need to stay close to you during the mission." Richard felt a surge of electricity course through him at her touch, and not just from the stabilizer. Their eyes met, and for a moment the chaos of the recent battle faded away. Captain Steele's voice crackled over the intercom, breaking the moment. "We've received intelligence about a hidden Malon colony on a jungle world. Commander Zalen wants us to investigate and recruit any survivors we find." As they boarded the scout ship, Richard marveled at its sleek design. The vessel hummed with energy, its systems a seamless blend of salvage technology and Malon engineering. "Cloaking systems online," Astra announced from her station. "We should be able to slip past any Zentari patrols." The ship lifted off, leaving the safety of the outpost behind. As they navigated through the asteroid field, Richard's enhanced reflexes allowed him to plot a course with uncanny precision. Days passed as they journeyed towards the jungle world. Captain Steele spent hours hunched over communication consoles, working to decrypt Centauri signals intercepted during the battle. Richard and Astra found themselves in constant proximity, the neural stabilizer keeping them physically connected as they worked and rested. As they approached their destination, the ship's sensors came alive with activity. "I'm detecting Malin energy signatures beneath the canopy," Astra reported, "but there's Centauri activity in orbit. We can't risk a direct approach." Richard's mind raced, drawing on both his training and the alien memories flooding his consciousness. "We'll use the shuttle for a covert landing," he suggested. "The main ship can create a distraction if needed." With the plan set, Richard and Astra boarded the shuttle. As they descended through the atmosphere, the dense jungle canopy loomed before them. Richard's hands flew across the controls, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to thread the needle between massive tree trunks and tangled vines. They touched down in a small clearing, the shuttle's systems powering down to avoid detection. As Richard and Astra stepped out, the humid air hit them like a wall. The jungle teemed with life, a riot of alien colors and sounds surrounding them. "This way," Astra whispered, consulting a handheld scanner. "I'm picking up faint energy readings." They pushed through the underbrush, Richard's heightened senses alert for any sign of danger. Suddenly, they emerged into a clearing dominated by crumbling stone structures, partially reclaimed by the jungle. "It's a Malin outpost," Astra breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "But it looks abandoned." As they approached the ruins, a series of lights flickered to life. A synthesized voice spoke in the Malin language, and Astra's face lit up with recognition. "It's asking for genetic verification," she explained, placing her hand on a weathered panel. The ground beneath them shuddered, and a hidden doorway slid open, revealing a passage descending into the earth. They made their way down, the air growing cooler and drier. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber filled with advanced technology, much of it still operational, and there, emerging from the shadows, were the Malon survivors they had hoped to find. A tall, graceful figure stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Astra. "After all these centuries," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "I never expected to see a familiar face." Astra's eyes widened in recognition. "Scientist Lyra, is it really you?" As the two embraced, Richard's calm link crackled to life. Captain Steele's voice was tight with urgency. "We've got company up here. A Centauri patrol ship just entered orbit. They're beginning a surface scan." Richard's mind raced, drawing on the ancient Malon combat memories, surging through his consciousness. He turned to the assembled Malon, his voice ringing with authority. "We need to hide your energy signature, and fast. Do you have any bioengineered plant life that could help?" Lyra's eyes lit up with understanding. "The Lumini vines," she said, turning to her team. "Activate the network." Outside, the jungle came alive with bioluminescent light, creating a dazzling, chaotic display that scrambled the Centauri scanners. For now, at least, they were safe. As the immediate danger passed, Richard and Astra explained their mission to the Malon colonists. Lyra listened intently, her expression growing grave. "We've been working on adapting our physiology to resist Centauri weapons," she revealed. "The process is incomplete, but it could be the key to turning the tide of this war." Before they could discuss further, Captain Steele's voice came through again, his tone urgent. "I've decrypted more of the Centauri communications. It's worse than we thought. They're not just targeting Earth. They plan to eradicate all sentient life in the galaxy." The weight of this revelation settled over the group. Richard felt a sudden searing pain in his skull as the neural interface flared to life. Images flashed before his eyes. A massive weapon of incredible power, hidden in a distant star system. As the vision faded, Richard found himself leaning heavily on Astra, her presence anchoring him to reality. He looked up at the assembled Malon, his voice hoarse but determined. "I know where we need to go next," he said. "There's an ancient Malon superweapon out there. If we can find it, we might have a chance of stopping the Centauri once and for all." Lyra nodded, her decision made. We'll evacuate the colony and join your fight. Our research might be the edge you need." As they prepared to leave the jungle world, Richard felt the weight of their mission pressing down on him. The scout ship waited above, ready to carry them into the heart of Zentari-controlled space. With Earth unknowingly in the crosshairs and a galaxy-wide genocide looming, the race to find the superweapon had begun. As the scout ship lifted off from the jungle world, leaving behind the lush green canopy, Richard felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation. The coordinates of the ancient Milan superweapon burned in his mind, a beacon guiding them into the heart of Zentari-controlled space. Captain Steele's voice crackled over the intercom. "All hands, prepare for stealth operations. We're about to enter hostile territory." Richard and Astra took their positions at the helm, their bodies close as the neural stabilizer hummed between them. The ship's engines purred as they engaged the cloaking technology, their energy signature fading to a mere whisper in the vast expanse of space. As they navigated through treacherous asteroid fields and swirling nebulae, Richard's neural interface flared to life. Ancient Malan knowledge surged through his mind, revealing hidden routes and safe passages used by his ancestors to evade Zentari patrols. "There," he said, pointing to a narrow gap between two massive asteroids. "That's our way through." Astra's fingers danced across the controls, guiding the ship with precision. "How did you know about that passage?" she asked, her eyes wide with wonder. Richard tapped his temple. "The interface, it's like I can see the stars through the eyes of the ancient Malon." In the ship's engineering bay, Captain Steele worked tirelessly, his hands deep in the circuitry of the cloaking system. Scientist Lyra stood beside him, her knowledge of bioengineering proving invaluable as they integrated concepts developed by the jungle Malone. "If we can modulate the energy output to mimic space debris," Lyra suggested, "we might be able to slip past even the most advanced Zentari scanners." Steele nodded, sweat beading on his brow as he made the final adjustments. "Let's hope it works. We're about to put it to the test." As they approached the star system housing the superweapon, the ship's sensors lit up with activity. Richard's breath caught in his throat as he saw the massive Zentari construction project looming before them. "It's a forward operating base," Astra whispered, her voice tight with tension. "They're preparing for a full-scale invasion." Richard's mind raced, drawing on both his military training and the Malon combat memories surging through his consciousness. A plan began to form, daring and risky, but potentially their only chance. "We need to get closer," he said, turning to Captain Steele. "Can we disguise ourselves as a Zentari supply vessel?" Steele's eyes narrowed as he considered the proposal. "It's risky, but with the enhanced cloaking, it just might work." The next hours were a flurry of activity as they reconfigured the ship's energy signature and outer appearance. Richard and Astra worked in perfect synchronization, their bodies constantly in contact as they maneuvered through the bustling Zentari construction zone. Tension filled the air as they intercepted Zentari communications, gathering crucial intelligence about fleet strength and invasion timetables. Every moment brought the risk of discovery, their hearts pounding with each close call. Suddenly, a harsh voice cut through their communications channel. "Unidentified vessel, prepare for detailed scan. Your energy readings are unusual." Richard locked eyes with Astra, a silent understanding passing between them. In a split second, he connected directly to the ship's systems through his neural interface. Energy surged through the vessel, creating a controlled power surge that masked their true signature. A small explosion rocked the ship's exterior, sending sparks flying across the bridge. "Damage report," Steele barked, his fingers flying across the control panel. "Minor hull breach in Section 3, Astra reported, her voice steady despite the chaos. "It's under control." The Zentari commander's voice crackled through the speakers once more. "Vessel, what is your status?" "Apologies, Command," Richard responded, his voice disguised by the ship's communication filters. "We've experienced a malfunction in our primary power coupling. Request permission to withdraw for repairs." Tense seconds ticked by as they awaited a response. Finally, the Zentari commander spoke. "Permission granted. Clear the construction zone immediately." As they began to move away, Richard knew they couldn't risk lingering. "We need to make a run for it," he said, his eyes meeting Captain Steele's. "Use the sun's radiation as cover." Steele nodded grimly. "It's our only chance. All hands, brace for extreme maneuvers." The ship banked hard, accelerating towards the system's blazing star. Alarms blared as the hull temperature rose rapidly, the radiation battering their shields. Richard and Astra worked furiously, their bodies pressed together in the sweltering control room as they fought to keep the ship intact. "Hull integrity at 60%, Astra called out, her voice strained. "We can't take much more of this." With a final burst of speed, they broke free of the sun's gravitational pull, leaving any potential pursuers far behind. But their victory was short-lived as the ship's systems began to fail one by one. "Faster-than-light drive is offline," Steele reported grimly. "Long-range communications are down. We're running on emergency power." As they limped towards the coordinates of the superweapon, the reality of their situation set in. They had escaped the Zentari, but at a terrible cost. Now, with life support systems failing, they raced against time itself. The ship's sensors pinged, detecting a massive structure hidden within a dense asteroid field. The ancient Malon superweapon loomed before them, a testament to the technological prowess of a bygone era. But as they approached, the weapon's automated defense systems flared to life, perceiving them as a potential threat. Energy beams lanced out from hidden emplacements, narrowly missing their already damaged hull. "We need to transmit Milan identification codes," Astra shouted, her fingers flying across the console. "Richard, can you access the old protocols through the neural interface?" Richard closed his eyes, diving deep into the sea of Malone memories. Ancient codes and sequences flashed through his mind as he struggled to find the right combination. Outside, the asteroid field grew denser, chunks of space rock buffeting their wounded ship. Captain Steele fought the controls, narrowly avoiding collisions that would spell their doom. As a massive asteroid loomed directly in their path, Richard's eyes snapped open. "I've got it!" he exclaimed, feeding the ancient identification codes into the ship's transmitter. The superweapon's defenses powered down, but the danger was a long way to go. Their ship, battered and barely functioning, drifted toward the ancient Malon structure. With no power for course corrections, they could only watch as the distance between them and their goal, or their destruction, rapidly closed. Richard gripped Astra's hand tightly as the superweapon filled their view screen. Would they find salvation within its ancient halls, or had they come this far only to meet their end? Demise. The superweapon loomed ever closer, its massive form filling their view screen as the damaged ship drifted helplessly toward it. Suddenly, the weapon's defensive systems powered down, the menacing energy beams dissipating into nothingness. A soft hum filled the bridge as the ancient Malon structure recognized Astra's genetic signature, welcoming them home after centuries of isolation. "We're being pulled in," Captain Steele announced, his hands hovering uselessly over the dead controls. "Brace for docking procedure." The ship shuddered as it entered a vast, dimly lit hangar. Emergency lights flickered to life, casting an eerie glow over the cavernous space. As the vessel settled onto the hangar floor with a metallic groan, Richard's neural interface sparked to life. Information flooded his mind, illuminating holographic displays throughout the superweapon and activating long-dormant machinery. "We need to split up," Richard said, his voice tight with urgency. "Steele, you and Lyra focus on repairing the ship and investigating the weapon systems. Astra and I will head to the central control room." As they disembarked, the team's footsteps echoed in the cavernous space. Richard and Astra set off down a winding corridor, the walls pulsing with faint bioluminescence that responded to their presence. They hadn't gone far when a series of clicks and whirs alerted them to danger. "Get down!" Richard shouted, tackling Astra to the ground as a barrage of energy bolts sizzled overhead. His enhanced reflexes, fueled by ancient Malon combat memories, allowed him to analyze the threat in split seconds. "Automated defense system, stay close to me." Together, they navigated the treacherous hallways. Richard's newly honed skills guided them through a maze of laser grids, pressure-sensitive floor panels, and holographic decoys. Astra's quick thinking complemented his physical prowess, her understanding of Malon technology allowing them to bypass security measures that would have stymied either of them alone. After what felt like hours of careful progression, they reached a massive set of doors emblazoned with intricate Milan script. As they approached, the doors parted silently, revealing the central control room beyond. The chamber was a marvel of ancient technology, with holographic displays floating in midair and control consoles that seemed to grow organically from the floor. At the center stood a raised platform with a pulsing interface. Richard and Astra approached cautiously, their hands finding each other instinctively. As their fingers intertwined and touched the interface, the room came alive. A shimmering hologram materialized before them, unfolding the long and bitter history of the Milan-Zentari conflict. "It's not just a weapon," Astra breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's a terraforming device. Look at the scale of it." Richard nodded, absorbing the information through his neural link. "It's designed to alter entire planetary environments, making them inhospitable to Zentari biology. This could change everything." Their moment of revelation was cut short by Captain Steele's voice crackling over their communicators. "Richard, Astra, you need to get down here. We've found something you've got to see." They raced back through the corridors, the facility's defenses now recognizing them as allies. In the weapon bay, they found Steele and Lyra standing before a row of sleek biomechanical suits. "Malin battle armor," Lyra explained, her hands moving expertly over one of the suits. "They're designed to interface directly with the wearer's nervous system. With some modifications based on our jungle Malon research, we might be able to create the ultimate defense against Zentari weapons." Before they could discuss further, an alarm blared throughout the facility. Richard's neural link flooded with sensor data, showing a massive Zentari battle fleet entering the system. "They must have detected the energy surge when we activated the superweapon," Steele growled. "We're out of time." Richard made a split-second decision. "Steele, with me. We're suiting up." He turned to Astra and Lyra. "Can you integrate the bioengineering modifications into the suits?" The women nodded, already moving to work. Richard and Steele stepped into the ancient armor, wincing as neural interfaces burrowed into their skin. Power surged through them, enhancing their strength and reflexes to superhuman levels. As Astra and Lyra worked feverishly to complete the modifications, Richard connected to the superweapon's defensive systems. Massive energy beams lanced out into space, obliterating the first wave of Zentari ships. But the enemy was quick to adapt, spreading out to avoid the main firing arc. "We need a new strategy," Richard said, his mind racing. "The terraforming capabilities. We can use them to alter the space around us. Create an environment the Zentari ships can't survive." Astra's eyes lit up with understanding. It's never been done before, but theoretically, she was already moving to the control interface, her fingers flying over the holographic displays. As the Zentari fleet closed in, Richard and Astra stood side by side at the controls, their bodies in constant contact as they guided the superweapon's incredible power. The space around the asteroid field began to warp and shift, generating powerful gravitational eddies and radiation storms that tore apart the approaching Zentari vessels. Their plan worked, decimating the enemy fleet, but the strain on the ancient systems was too great. Explosions rocked the structure, and warning klaxons blared throughout the facility. "We need to go, now," Steele shouted over the din. "The ship's barely patched together, but it'll have to do." As they raced for the hangar, Richard scooped Astra into his arms, the battlesuit allowing him to carry her effortlessly through the collapsing corridors. They reached the ship just as another explosion rocked the superweapon, nearly knocking them off their feet. Richard and Astra took the controls, their movements perfectly synchronized as they guided the battered vessel out of the disintegrating hangar. The viewport filled with chaos, Zentari ships being torn apart by the altered space, massive chunks of the superweapon breaking off and hurtling past them. "Hold on!" Astra yelled as she punched the engines to maximum. They burst free of the asteroid field, riding the shockwave of the superweapon's final explosion. The ship groaned and shuddered, systems flickering as they pushed it to its limits. As the chaos faded behind them and the immediate danger passed, the team allowed themselves a moment to breathe. They had dealt a significant blow to the Zentari, but at a tremendous cost. Richard looked at Astra, her face illuminated by the glow of the control panel. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. Their bond, forged in the crucible of battle and strengthened by their shared experiences, had never been stronger. But there was no time to rest. With their ship barely holding together and armed with new knowledge and technology, they set a course for Earth. They had to warn humanity about the impending invasion and prepare Earth's defenses using their newly acquired Milan technology. As the stars streaked by outside, Richard felt the weight of their mission settle over him. The real battle, he knew, was just beginning. Beginning. The real battle, he knew, was just starting. As they emerged from faster-than-light travel near Earth, alarms blared throughout the ship. The viewport filled with a horrifying sight, a massive debris field stretching as far as the eye could see. Twisted metal, shattered hulls, and defunct satellites drifted silently in the void. "My God," Captain Steele whispered, his face ashen. "That's the Earth Defense Fleet." Richard's hands tightened on the controls. "Centauri Advance Force, we're too late." Astra's fingers flew across the sensor readouts. "Multiple Centauri signatures detected planetside. The invasion has already begun." With unbreakable spirit, Richard pushed their battered vessel to its limits. The ship groaned and shuddered as they navigated the treacherous debris field, narrowly avoiding collisions with floating wreckage. A jagged piece of hull plating scraped against their starboard side, sending vibrations through the deck plating. As they entered Earth's atmosphere, the true scale of devastation became apparent. Centauri ships hung in the sky like dark thunderclouds, raining destruction on major cities below. Plumes of smoke rose from burning skyscrapers, and the night sky was lit by anti-aircraft fire. "We need somewhere to land," Lyra said, her voice tight with tension. "Somewhere we can regroup and share what we've learned." Richard's mind raced through possibilities before settling on a memory from his days in the Earth Interstellar Salvage Corps. "There's a hidden military base in the Rocky Mountains. If it's still operational, it's our best bet." He banked the ship sharply, setting a course for the coordinates burned into his memory. As they approached the mountain range, the ship's proximity alarms screamed to life. "Incoming fire!" Steele shouted. "The base defenses are targeting us." Richard's enhanced reflexes took over. He sent the ship into a series of wild evasive maneuvers, barrel rolling and diving to avoid the streams of energy weapons fire. "Astra, transmit identification codes, now!" Astra's fingers blurred across the console, inputting a rapid sequence of codes. Seconds stretched into eternity as they waited for a response, energy bolts sizzling past the viewport. Suddenly, the barrage ceased. A gruff voice crackled over the comms. "Unidentified vessel, you are cleared for landing. Welcome home, soldier." They touched down on a camouflaged landing pad that irised open from the mountainside. As the ship's ramp lowered, they were immediately surrounded by a squad of heavily armed soldiers in exo-armor. A tall, imposing figure strode through the ring of soldiers. General Marcus Hawthorne, base commander and Richard's former superior officer, regarded them with a mixture of relief and suspicion. "Richard," he said, his voice gravelly, "I hope you've brought us some good news. We're running out of options here." Richard and Captain Steele quickly briefed the general on the Centauri threat, the Malone alliance, and the advanced technology they'd acquired. Meanwhile, Astra and Lyra huddled with a group of wide-eyed Earth scientists, sharing their knowledge of Malone bioengineering and weapons systems. General Hawthorne's face grew grimmer with each passing moment. "Our defenses are failing," he admitted. "The Centauri tech is beyond anything we've ever encountered. If what you're saying about these Malone battlesuits is true, it might be our only shot." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Astra and Lyra worked feverishly with Earth's brightest minds to integrate Malone principles into the base's shield technology. Richard and Steele pored over tactical displays, identifying weak points in the Centauri invasion force. A plan began to take shape. A special ops team, equipped with the enhanced Malone battlesuits, would strike at the Centauri command ship coordinating the invasion. Richard and Steele volunteered to lead the mission. As preparations reached a fever pitch, Richard found himself pulled aside by Astra. They ducked into an empty corridor, bodies pressed close in the narrow space. "Richard, Astra began, her eyes shimmering with emotion. Words failed them both. Instead, they came together in a passionate embrace, lips meeting with desperate intensity. For a moment, the chaos of war faded away, leaving only the warmth of their bodies in the mingling of their breath. The moment shattered as alarms blared throughout the base. A soldier's voice echoed over the intercom. "Zentari attack force inbound! All personnel to battle stations!" Richard reluctantly pulled away from Astra, his eyes locked with hers. "Stay safe," he whispered. "You too," she replied, her hand lingering on his cheek. Richard sprinted to the armory, where he donned his Malon battlesuit. As the neural interface connected, power surged through his body. He joined the base's defenders at the perimeter, just as the first wave of Zentari troops breached the outer defenses. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Richard's enhanced abilities allowed him to move with inhuman speed and precision, his energy weapons cutting down Zentari soldiers with deadly accuracy. Earth's defenders rallied around him, inspired by his prowess. Suddenly, a Zentari energy blast struck Richard squarely in the chest. His battlesuit systems overloaded, sending white-hot agony coursing through his body. He fell to one knee, vision blurring as warnings flashed across his HUD. Through the haze of pain, he saw a familiar figure racing towards him. Astra, heedless of the danger, rushed to his side. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency over his suit's control panel, stabilizing the malfunctioning systems. "Hold on," she murmured, her face inches from his. "I've got you." As Richard's system stabilized, he became aware of the firefight raging around them. He pulled Astra close, shielding her with his armored body as energy bolts sizzled overhead. In the sky above, Captain Steele led the base's air defense, his voice crackling over the comms as he coordinated their counterattack. Slowly but surely, the tide of battle turned. The Zentari attack ships retreated, leaving behind a trail of destruction. In the aftermath, as they assessed the damage and tended to the wounded, long-range sensors delivered chilling news. A massive Zentari warship, dwarfing anything they'd seen before, had entered the solar system. General Hawthorne's face was grim as he addressed the team. "That has to be their central command. If it reaches Earth, we're finished." Richard exchanged a look with Astra, both understanding what needed to be done. "We'll take it out," he said firmly. Within hours, a specially modified stealth ship was prepped for launch. Richard, Astra, Captain Steele, and a select group of Earth's finest soldiers boarded the vessel, equipped with the remaining Malon battlesuits and every piece of advanced tech they could salvage. As the ship's engines hummed to life, Richard and Astra shared one last look. No words were needed. Their eyes said everything. The fate of two species and their future together now hung in the balance. The stealth ship rose silently from its hangar, accelerating towards the looming shape of the Zentari command ship. As they left Earth's atmosphere, the true scale of their enemy became apparent. The Zentari vessel blotted out the stars, a city-sized monstrosity jam packed with weapons. Richard took a deep breath, centering himself as the neural interface of his battlesuit pulsed in sync with his heartbeat. "All right, team," he said, his voice steady. "Let's end this war." He turned to face his team, grit etched on his features. "Everyone, check your gear one last time. We're about to make history." As they approached the colossal Zentari command ship, Richard activated the stealth systems. The vessel's outline blurred, becoming nearly invisible against the backdrop of stars. They glided past the outer defenses, undetected by the swarm of Zentari fighters patrolling the area. Astra's fingers danced across the sensor readouts. "I'm detecting a weak point in their energy core," she said, her voice tight with concentration. "If we can get close enough, we might be able to trigger a cascade failure." Richard nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. "We'll need to board the ship, stealth approach, then a spacewalk to breach the hull." The team moved with practiced efficiency, donning their Malon battlesuits and checking the magnetic clamps. As the airlock cycled open, Richard felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. He led the way, launching himself into the void. The Zentari command ship loomed before them, a city-sized monstrosity jam packed with weapons. Richard's enhanced vision picked out the optimal entry point, a maintenance hatch near the aft section. They activated their mag boots, latching onto the ship's hull with a series of muffled thuds. Using a plasma cutter, Richard carved through the outer plating. The team slipped inside, finding themselves in a narrow service corridor. Artificial gravity kicked in, and Richard felt the weight of his suit settle around him. Astra, Lyra, you're up. Richard spoke into his comm. We need those internal sensors down. Back on the stealth ship, Astra and Lyra huddled over their consoles. Their fingers flew across holographic interfaces, probing the Zentari systems for vulnerabilities. We're in, Astra reported after several tense minutes. Sensors are offline, but they're already trying to adapt. We'll keep them busy. Richard led his team deeper into the ship, their weapons at the ready. They encountered their first group of Zentari defenders in a large cargo bay. The battle was swift and brutal. Richard's enhanced reflexes allowed him to dodge energy blasts with inhuman speed, while Captain Steele's precision shots dropped Zentari soldiers before they could raise the alarm. As they pushed forward, the ship's gravity began to fluctuate wildly. One moment they were weightless, the next slammed to the deck by double Earth gravity. Astra, what's happening? Richard grunted, struggling to stay upright. They're onto us, Astra's voice crackled through the comm. I'm doing my best to counter, but they're good. Really good. The team pressed on, fighting through waves of Zentari troops. The narrow corridors and unpredictable gravity made the combat chaotic and disorienting. Richard relied heavily on his neural interface, the Malon technology giving him split-second reaction times. As they neared the energy core, they encountered a group of high-ranking Zentari officers. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They moved with deadly precision, their weapons cutting through the air with lethal intent. Richard and Captain Steele found themselves back-to-back, surrounded by a ring of Zentari elite. The battlesuits hummed with power as they engaged in a deadly dance. Richard's fists blurred, enhanced strength allowing him to punch through Zentari armor. Steele's energy rifle sang, each shot finding its mark with unerring accuracy. Suddenly, Richard's vision filled with static. His limbs locked up, and he collapsed to the deck. Astra, he gasped, fighting to remain conscious. Neural interface overloading. Captain Steele immediately moved to cover him, laying down suppressing fire. Talk to me, kid, Steele's gruff voice cut through the haze of pain. What do you need? Astra's voice came through, calm and steady despite the chaos. Richard, listen carefully. I'm going to walk you through a manual reset. You need to... Her words faded in and out as Richard struggled to focus. He followed her instructions, fighting against the searing pain in his skull. With trembling hands, he manipulated the suit's control panel, inputting a complex sequence of commands. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a surge of energy, the suit came back online. Richard's senses sharpened, his strength returned tenfold. He rose to his feet, a primal roar tearing from his throat as he rejoined the fray. The Zentari officers fell before their combined might. As the last one crumpled to the ground, Richard and Steele shared a look of grim satisfaction. They had won this battle, but the war was far from finished. With restored dedication, they pushed on to the energy core. The massive chamber pulsed with almost unchecked power, arcs of energy dancing between towering pillars. Richard's team spread out, planting explosive charges at key structural points. As the last charge was set, a sobering realization hit them. The explosion needed to destroy the ship would be far too large for them to escape. Richard's mind raced, considering their options. There was only one choice. Everyone, fall back to the extraction point, he ordered, his voice steady despite the weight of his decision. I'll stay behind to manually trigger the detonation. Captain Steele gripped his shoulder. You can't be serious, son. There has to be another way. Richard shook his head. We don't have time to find one. Go now. That's an order. As the team reluctantly retreated, Astra's voice came through the comm, fierce and determined. I'm not leaving you, Richard. Not now, not ever. Before he could protest, Astra appeared in the doorway of the core chamber, her battlesuit scorched from recent combat. She strode purposefully to his side, already examining the explosive charges. Together, she said, her eyes meeting his through their visors. We'll find a way. They worked in perfect synchronization, Astra's technical brilliance complementing Richard's enhanced abilities. They modified the charges, creating a carefully timed sequence that would trigger a cascade failure in the ship's systems. As they made the final adjustments, alarms blared throughout the ship. A tide of Zentari troops poured into the chamber, energy weapons blazing. Richard and Astra stood back to back, their movements flowing together as one as they fought off the assault. "Now!" Astra shouted, slapping the detonator. The first explosion rocked the ship, sending tremors through the deck plating. As they turned to run, a stray energy blast caught Astra square in the chest. Her suit's systems flickered, and she stumbled. Without hesitation, Richard scooped her into his arms, his enhanced strength allowing him to carry her effortlessly. They raced through the disintegrating ship, explosions blooming behind them like deadly flowers. Richard's lungs burned as he pushed himself to the limit, Astra's labored breathing in his ear, spurring him on. They reached the escape pod just as another explosion tore through the corridor behind them. Captain Steele was there, holding the hatch open. "Come on!" he roared over the din of alarms and shattering metal. Richard leapt inside, cradling Astra protectively as Steele sealed the hatch. The pod jettisoned away from the command ship, hurtling into the void of space. Through the viewport, they watched as the massive Zentari vessel began to break apart, secondary explosions chaining through its superstructure. As the shock wave hit their tiny craft, Richard held Astra close, their eyes locked on each other. Whatever came next, they would face it together.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.